The Russian invasion of Ukraine has put the entire European Union in a very uncomfortable position. 8 months of war did not go easy for the members of the European Union, and the upcoming months are going to be much worse. The whole Europe is united against Russia, but they may be just too short-sighted to see what damage they are inflicting on their economies and how many people will pay with their well-being for tanks, weapons and sanctions. How come that Russia, despite being the most sanctioned country in the world, still manages to bring the European economy almost to a collapse? Throughout these 8 months, Europe has introduced multiple packages of sanctions targeting various aspects of Russia's economy. As of July, Europe has almost entirely cut off exports of electronics, semiconductors, sensitive machinery, chemicals, goods for the oil industry, goods for the industrial use, etc. They have also cut off imports of coal, iron, steel, cement, rubber, woods, spirits, gold and more. SWIFT was cut off, all investments in Russia were stopped, financial operations were severely limited. These sanctions are certainly working, and the Russian economy is going through a very rough patch. However, the European Union might have shot themselves in the foot. Let me explain. Before the war broke out, Russia was among Europe's biggest trading partners, representing 5.8% of European Union's total trade. At the same time, the European Union was Russia's #1 trading partner, accounting for over 37% of the country's trade. 37.9% of Russian goods were going to the European Union. In 2021, the total trade between European Union and Russia amounted to over 257 billion euros. Russia has an abundance of natural resources necessary for European industry. The import from Russia to the European Union in 2021 was $168.75 billion. What was Europe importing? Iron, steel, precious stones, wood, copper, aluminum, nickel, fertilizers, organic and non-organic chemicals, plastics, rubbers, machinery, oilseed, grain, seed, fruits, vegetables, and so on. And now all imports from Russia are either halted or severely limited. To compensate for the absence of these imports, the European Union was forced to find new import sources which had its influence on prices and inflation. The inflation is currently breaking all records, totaling to an average of 10.7% in October, the highest since the euro was introduced. The prices of goods have skyrocketed. For example, food, tobacco and alcohol prices have grown in September by 11.8%, and in October the growth totaled at 13.9%. To better understand the inflation in Europe, let's look at the so-called coffee index. According to the recent findings, the price of a cup of coffee rose by 16.9% since February. In the entire 2021, that growth totaled at 0.5%. Fresh milk is up by 24.3%, low-fat by 22.2%. Sugar is now 33.4% more expensive. Finland has seen the biggest price jump for coffee. It's now over 44% more expensive. But that's nothing compared to sugar prices in Poland. They are up by 109%. The milk in Lithuania and Hungary is now over 50% more costly. The inflation is almost out of control, and it will only get worse than that. Alongside with introducing sanctions, the European Union members have issued substantial sums of money to provide Ukraine with military aid. In the beginning of July, the joint financial aid the European Union provided to Ukraine reached 2.5 billion euros. As of October, the United Kingdom has pledged a total of $1.7 billion in humanitarian and economic support. Germany has signed off a 1 billion grant. Latvia has committed over 1% of its GDP worth of aid, Estonia 0.95% of GDP worth. And now the European Union is planning to increase its support. The Commission has recently proposed to allocate 18 billion euros for aid to Ukraine in 2023, which equals to 1.5 billion a month. Such help will keep paying wages, pensions, maintain essential public services such as hospitals, schools, housing, and restore some of the destroyed critical infrastructure. Those numbers are only for direct financial and humanitarian aid. The military aid is far bigger. In March alone, France, which has already sent help, is dispatching more military equipment as well as fuel. The Netherlands will supply air defense rockets and anti-tank systems to Ukraine. The Dutch government has shipped 200 Stinger air defense rockets and 50 Panzerfaust 3 anti-tank weapons with 400 rockets. Germany supplied Ukraine with 1,000 anti-tank weapons and 500 Stinger surface-to-air missiles from Bundeswehr stocks for defense against Russia. Neutral Finland took the historic decision to supply weapons to Ukraine and send 1,500 rocket launchers, 2,500 assault rifles, 150,000 rounds of ammunition, and 70,000 servings of field rations. As of August, the United Kingdom has pledged over $4 million worth of equipment, provided military training, tracking and aiming systems. Poland has granted over $1.8 billion worth of aid, Germany $1.2 billion. Together, the most active European supporters have granted over $8 billion in military aid, and such expenses are only destabilizing the boat because making such huge fund allocations from the budget isn't easy, and the inflation has already taken its toll. But those expenses and sanctions are not the worst part. The punishing sanctions that the European Union has so far announced against Russia for its invasion of Ukraine include shutting the government and banks out of global financial markets, restricting technology exports, and freezing the assets of influential Russians. But the hardest hit comes from the decision to cut Europe's reliance on Russian gas and oil. After 8 months, it is now heading towards the energy crisis, by far the biggest problem the European Union economy has ever faced. Gas prices have reached record highs in Europe and supplies are running low, stoking fears for the coming winter. As gas and electricity prices surge, millions in Europe are now spending record amounts of their income on energy. Energy is used for a range of activities, including in transportation, households, industry, services, agriculture and forestry. In food production, energy is used for fertilizers, harvesting, refrigeration and heating. Before the war, Russia supplied almost 40% of the European Union's gas consumption, and in 2022 it's 2 times smaller at only 20%. And Europe has plans to completely cut their dependence on Russian gas and oil by 2030, which will definitely be very hard to do. Currently, most countries have filled up their storage facilities enough to survive the winter. The European Union planned to reach an 80% target, but on average the storage is filled by 94%. Europe has also searched for alternatives to gas supplies, such as having shipments of liquefied natural gas and more pipeline gas from Norway and Azerbaijan. Some of these orders are already arriving at their destinations, indicating the oversupply. Plus, the temperatures this year have been very fortunate and warm, reaching 20 degrees centigrade or 68 degrees Fahrenheit in October. However, the stability of the continent depends on having a relatively normal winter, because if temperatures drop, it could make demand to increase the levels that Europe reserves cannot handle. If the winter gets super cold, the European Union economy is doomed. The industry won't be able to produce enough goods for export to battle soaring energy prices, and the governments will prefer to send gas to households rather than to factories. A reduction in current consumption and a pivot to use of the alternative sources of gas plus alternative power sources like nuclear and coal, Europe should be able to survive the coming cold season. But it's not going to be a walk in the park. Energy-saving measures are already affecting civilians and businesses, especially those that are energy intensive. Europe will probably survive this winter with only minor inconveniences, but the biggest concern people are having is for the winter of 2023-2024. Here is how the storage levels could look like through the upcoming winter if Russia decides to put more pressure on the West and cut off all supplies altogether. Then Russia could start selling its gas to China and India. In this case, Europe will be forced to come up with drastic measures and unusual solutions. Russia's invasion in Ukraine is clearly a turning point for Europe. Countries are forced to establish new, less efficient connections, implement reforms faster, and generally undergo certain crises. Plummeted export and import, crippled industry, loss of investments and properties, huge expenses in the form of aid, skyrocketing inflation, and soaring energy prices. That's something people were not prepared for. People's good intentions to put pressure on Russia are damaging for the European economy just as much, if not more, that they are damaging Russia. The question stands: whose temper will run out faster, Russia's or Europeans? Will the European Union countries be able to restore their economy to fight through this economic turmoil? Or will they be forced to comply with Russia to save themselves? Only time will tell. All we can say for now is that Russia is directly and indirectly damaging the European Union, planting a seed of conflict. What do you think? Will Europe withstand, or is the European Union doomed? Type your thoughts in the comments below, smash that like button if you have learned something and enjoyed watching, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the upcoming videos. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.